Hello, it's great to be with you again. And I thought it would be interesting for us to explore together the winter solstice that's going to be here in 3 days' time. And I know those of you in the southern hemisphere will be experiencing the apparent opposite. But one of the wonderful things about the cycle of the seasons is that the opposite is always occurring. There seems to be a deep truth in that. If you think about what's happening in the southern hemisphere for a moment, we're moving up to the time of the longest day. But at the very moment, the sun has reached its maximum strength, as it were, and it's the longest day, already the turn has been made and it's going towards its opposite, the longest night. You can look at that very pessimistically, of course, and say, good heavens, just when I think everything is wonderful, the rot sets in. But of course, it's not the rot, it's the natural cycle. And here in the northern hemisphere, we're moving towards the time of the longest night. And it's lovely to see people arriving from Barnard Castle in County Durham and North Germany and all sorts of places. So, but I mustn't get distracted. Instead, let's talk about the winter solstice. So I thought it would be interesting for us to consider that. And one of the things that is striking about it is that it was clearly one of the most important times for our ancestors. This is why we have the extraordinary orientations of monuments like Newgrange and Ireland pointing towards the winter solstice. Even Stonehenge, which we tend to associate with reverence at the summer solstice, it's been shown that actually it's oriented towards the winter solstice too. And one of the key activities that we do in these in the ceremonies that we perform within Druidry is to really open ourselves to what it means to be at the time of the longest night. And so I thought we could do this together. We could gather, and I can see we're gradually gathering. You know, this activity of gradually people typing in that they're from Berlin and Guilford and Nebraska and Colorado and near Avebury and so on. This is this primal movement, if you think about it, that people have been doing since time began, since the dawn of humanity, which is coming together at certain times. From east and west, north and south, people would gather. When you look at Stonehenge and Avebury on Salisbury Plain, you look down on the land, you see there's this wonderful starfish pattern of 5 ridgeways, the Ridgeway, the Marlborough Downs, etc., all moving towards this area of Salisbury Plain in southwest England. And that, in that ritual landscape there, the monuments are oriented in all sorts of ways, and this great monument of Stonehenge is oriented towards the winter solstice as well as the summer solstice. And so we're acting out in our own way. A few words for the summer solstice, says Julianne in Australia. Yes, of course. We're acting out this activity, and we're doing it in our minds. And what I'd like to suggest, perhaps, is that we're doing it in our spirits too, which is why I find it helpful with these conversations, just to close my eyes for a little bit and just to imagine us gathering, the gathering of the clans. And here I see coming into the clearing in the forest, people from all sorts of directions. And what if we allow ourselves to take that imaginative leap for the moment, that this is the reality. The reality is our meeting together. And at some other level of outer reality, we're all sitting in separate places looking at machines. But that's only on one plane. At another plane, let's just allow ourselves that flight of fantasy or that deeper realization that we are actually together in some other space, some inner space. And the key feature in the ceremonies that we do in the order, in the solstice ceremonies, is that gradually we come to a place where we blow out all the candles, we turn off the lights if we happen to be doing the ceremony indoors, and we experience the darkness, not as something scary, but as something, there's this word fructifying from, we get words like fructose. It's sweet. We experience the darkness as sweet and as fertile, the fertile darkness. And this is what the longest night offers us, to really bathe in this fertile darkness. And so what I thought it would be fun to do would be for us to do this ourselves in anticipation of the solstice to come. And even if you're in New Zealand, as AD is, or you're in Australia, as someone else is who's on now, you can still experience this, because of course this experience of going into the darkness is something that we do every night. And one of the goals of Druidry is to orient ourselves towards the darkness, so we see it not as something frightening, but as something beautiful and as inspiring. So what I thought I'd do is something that we did once. We had a party here in the house with our local friends. They weren't Druids, but they knew we were. And I said to them, what would be, you all know that we follow Druidry, and let's show you a little bit of what we do, because we're approaching the winter solstice. What we do is this, and I turned out the lights, and then I explained to them that we were going to just enjoy being in this fertile darkness, just letting go and being nourished by it. And then I lit a single candle, and we had a bunch of tea lights around us, and we invited each person to pick up a tea light and light it from the central candle. And what happened, of course, is we ended up with a room of all our friends, 30 people or so, all standing there holding a single light in the darkness. And of course, that's a magic. That's a moment of magic. You can feel it, and there was complete silence. And I paused for a moment, and then I said, now you can see what, you can get a taste, as it were, of why we celebrate the winter solstice. And of course, people said, oh, can't we stay like this? This is lovely. We want to just rest in this place. So let's do that now. Let's turn the lights out. And of course, you can either just imagine you're doing this, or if you want to, you can actually do it. I did suggest, I think, on a note that you might like to bring a tea light or a candle. But really don't worry if you haven't done that. Just enjoy this. But if you have brought a tea light, a candle, by all means, go ahead. So what we do, first of all, is we symbolically evoke the longest night, and we allow ourselves to enter into the beautiful darkness. I'll take my glasses off so they don't reflect the light. I'll even hang something over your comments, which are bright, bright, bright comments. Oops, there we go. And now let's just enjoy this night. Let's imagine it's the night of the winter solstice, the longest night. And we're just allowing ourselves to feel nourished by the darkness, like a baby floating in the womb, like a star floating in the night sky. We ask that we might be inspired by this darkness, fortified, inspired. And then the year is reborn. The candle is lit. And it looks very bright on this side. This is a lovely candle made by Ziggy in Austria. And perhaps there are viewers holding their candles up as well in different places around the earth. And so we can sense now these candles all around the earth glowing with light, forming a network of light, a constellation of light. And then we declare the birth of the new year. If this was the winter solstice, we declare the birth of the new year, and all the candles, all the lights would be lit, and sprigs of mistletoe would be handed out, and remember to blow your candle out for safety reasons, and the new cycle has begun. Now, this simple act is so powerful, I think, because if you think about what magic is, what is magic? What is this work we're doing of developing our consciousness, following a spiritual way? It's one of working with the relationship between light and darkness. The primal experience of sitting under the night sky and seeing this great expanse of darkness and then these points of light. That's a primal experience that our ancestors would have had. What is that light? What is that dark? What is the relationship? How beautiful it is, how awe-inspiring. And then, of course, in the dead of night, under a dark moon, lighting a fire and sitting around a fire. We all know how wonderfully nurturing sitting around a fire is at night. It's primal experiences. And that, of course, is why our ancestors created these experiences in caves. The very earliest manifestations of the human religious impulse is to be found in caves, where one would be led down into the darkness. And perhaps the initiate would be left in the darkness. You can imagine the priestesses and priests holding animal fat lamps in their hands, taking you down deep into the cave, and then blowing the candle out and leaving you in the darkness. And then after perhaps 3 nights and 3 days, enough for you to wonder if you were going mad, or enough time for you to start to receive visions, the priests and priestesses would return, would light their animal fat lamps, and you would see all around you these images of animals on the walls of the caves, painted like in Lascaux or the Chauvet caves. You would see these images and you would be in the womb of the goddess, and then you would be led out of the darkness of the cave, up, 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 no doubt to coincide with the time of the dawn light rising. And so this is a powerful experience. This is the experience of birth, coming out of the darkness of the womb. And this is our experience of magic. Seeing, for those of you who've been at the birth of your child, seeing your child coming out of the darkness, coming out of the womb, is sheer magic. The magic of sowing and reaping, of planting. You plant seeds in the ground and then they come up into the light. And this is a magical process that is repeated for us every morning. Every morning, in that moment of waking, it's like a plant growing out of the earth. It's like an initiate stumbling out of the cave into the dawn light. However groggy we might be, however hard we might find it to wake up, that's the process that's occurring. And of course, when we go to sleep at night, we take the reverse journey. We allow ourselves to sink into the darkness of the unconscious or of the other realms. And this leads me to another side of it, which is I had a very interesting email from somebody the other day who asked me, who was struggling with believing in spiritual ideas which aren't proved by science, but longing to, and writing, at the root of my question is a fear of death and a longing for belief in an afterlife. If I can state without doubt that there is more to existence than the particles and processes described by material science, it would ease my fear that death is only dissolution. And that raises a really interesting question, which is whether our spiritual striving is actually motivated simply by a fear of death. If you can allow yourself to think this way, this is a really challenging thing. I remember when I was young, when I was probably about 5, when I first realized that that people died. I remember being so surprised and shocked and upset. And then when I was 11, I read the story of the Buddha and how the Buddha was kept from the harsh realities of life because his father wanted him to be the king. But the gods arranged it so that he saw first somebody who was old, so he became aware of the reality of old age. And then he saw somebody who was ill, he became aware of suffering. And then he saw somebody who had died, and he became aware of the reality of death. And that was such, and then he chose to devote his life to seeking enlightenment and to solving the problem of suffering. And I think there is a way in which our fear of death is actually deeply related to the spiritual path. But unlike say a materialist psychologist's point of view, which would say that it's simply fear, I would suggest that actually behind this fear is a longing and a yearning for depth, for understanding, and really a sense that although fear is a natural human response, that it hides a secret. It hides an experience, a knowing that we're going to travel to another realm. I used to know a wonderful man called Sir George Trevelyan, who was a key figure in the New Age movement in England, who in his old age, I used to meet him sometimes at Glastonbury, and he used to say, "I'm so looking forward to dying, this great adventure, I just can't wait." And it was so kind of brazen and open, it was kind of astonished me, but inspired me as well. And it still fuels, I think, my approach to this. And I wrote a while back, I decided to study this process and to look at an understanding of it, and wrote a section in the book. I wrote a novel called The Prophecies, and in The Prophecies is another book, and that other book is called Cosmiel's Gift. And because it's so very different to the rest of the novel, I published it as a separate little book, which is about the post-mortem journey. It's about the journey that we take when we slough off the physical body like an old overcoat. What I realized by looking at all the different teachings of the different religions was how there's this tremendous amount of teaching, understanding, knowledge that we find both in the East and the West that correlates and is similar. We don't have enough time to go into this at the moment because I've promised that I will limit these talks to just 20 minutes. But maybe we can do a special session on this, because I know how important this is for many people. But but I want to read you just one other email that came in today, which connects with it, which raises some interesting questions too. It would be lovely to hear you say a few words about the other world. The term is used in different contexts. When it refers to that part of existence which cannot be directly perceived with the five senses, that is clear to me, although other doesn't seem the best possible description. However, otherworld is sometimes used as a place, as if it is a place where people go when they die, and that is very unclear. And then she says something extraordinary. She says, if we do not die, we cannot be reborn, and the notion of us as individuals going somewhere after death seems strange. Now, isn't that fantastic? If we do not die, we cannot be reborn. And that, for me, introduces this whole question of what Tim Freke calls paralogical thinking. The thinking that embraces paradox. And this type of thinking arises from the understanding that life is inherently and profoundly paradoxical, so that two apparently opposite things can be true at the same time. And so I think if we apply that to the question of death, it becomes very interesting. You see, logical thinking is either or thinking. Paralogical thinking, as Tim says, is both and thinking. And reality is fundamentally paradoxical. This means that we can't understand the depths of existence with either or logical thinking. We need to use paralogical thinking, which says something can be both this and that, depending on how we look at it. And I think if we apply that to the question of death, I think it's quite possible to make a statement that says we do not die and we do die, and they are both true. Sounds perhaps obfuscating, but I think it's profoundly true. It's profoundly true. The particular theory that I favor is that we go through actually two deaths. That the first death of the physical body releases our soul and our spirit, the rest of us, our consciousness. But then, a little later, we go through what is known as the second death, where we let go of our personality. And instead, we retain our core self, the kind of key, the essence of ourself. So all the kind of annoying bits, because let's face it, we might love our characters and our personalities, but not everybody else does. And it would be quite fun to have a different one next time round. So that's my belief. This is just what I believe, is I believe my body will fall away. I'll discover, hey, I'm still here, but a little bit later, the next part of me will fall away. So it's like a two-stage rocket, and I'll be left with the essence of myself, and then that takes another whole journey, but that's for another time. That's where the term seventh heaven comes in. I started writing Cosmiel's Gift to explore what was meant by the term I'm in seventh heaven. And it actually refers to the journey that you take through seven heavens to your core being. And then if you choose to believe in reincarnation, you take the journey back through the heavens, back down to this earth. And so the winter solstice is a time that allows us in a way to do this in a tiny way, that in that moment that we enacted where we let go and just allowed everything to fall away, and then we lit the candle again. Lighting the candle was symbolic of our rebirth, this core part of ourself that comes from the seventh heaven and is reborn again as this little flame that exists in a baby, which in, of course, the Christian tradition is born in a crib, in a manger. And so let's finish here. Thank you for listening. I'll read everybody's comments. It's I'll be so interested to read everybody's comments, and it's somebody's saying, do we have to come back? Well, let me just finish. I can't resist this one. Let me just finish with one idea, which is the Celtic idea of the circuit of the soul, where each of us has an absolutely unique journey. So we don't all have to reincarnate. We don't all go straight up or straight down or sideways or whatever. Everybody has a unique journey, just as in this world, so in the other world. And of course, the question about the other world, why we call it the other world, we'll have to leave for another time. But it's worth thinking, why do we call it the other world? So the next 2 Mondays happen to be holidays. The next Monday is Christmas Day. Monday after that is New Year's Day. So let's have a break for a fortnight, have a wonderful holiday season, have a wonderful Christmas, a wonderful Yule, a wonderful solstice in a few days' time, and a great beginning to your new year. And then let's meet again on I think it's the 8th of January. I'll put a notice up on the Facebook page, and let's explore some more topics together. Okay, lots of love, and see you in 2018.